guys? It's Zyloc Media Hindsight, and it's October 3rd, a little over 2 weeks until the Portland Retro Gaming Expo kicks off, and I couldn't be more excited. I'm here to bring you another Atari 2600 review, and today we're going to be looking at Crypts of Chaos. It came out in 1982. It was published by 20th Century Fox Video Games. It's actually a really interesting game. It's not a horror game like it sounds. It's actually a first-person perspective dungeon crawler. And really the only thing it has to do with horror is, you're fighting, goblins, slimes, whatever, but that's more of a fantasy-based idea. But you have to kind of like manage your resources, kind of like you would in like a Resident Evil game where you have to manage your ammunition. You only have so many resources to work with to try to get through this dungeon and defeat all these monsters. It's actually really cool. I didn't think it would actually be capable to pull something like this off on the Atari, but when I turned it on, I was actually pretty surprised. So let's take a look. Initially, when I started playing Crypts of Chaos, I figured I'd have to scratch the idea since it really isn't a horror game at all. But something happened during my time with it that made me have to share my experience. Through just an hour of gameplay, I knew that Crypts of Chaos was something special. Is it because I spent far more time with it than I expected? Is it that it pushes the limits of what the platform is capable of? Or is it simply because the gameplay is engaging? Yes, it's all of these things, but it's the excitement that it created for me to unearth other classics on the Atari 2600 that really sticks with me. It's true that each and every system to this day has its own set of defining titles. Is Crypts of Chaos a defining title for the Atari 2600? Not that I've ever been aware of, but it is for me. It's not a perfect game, but the change in perspective that it provided me is not something that I find often in such an unknown title. The concept is simple. Navigate a first-person dungeon, fight off monsters, and shoot for a high score before your last breath. Movement is slow and awkward, personal map drawing is required, and each corridor basically looks the same. But this doesn't matter. The ingenuity that went into making this brand of quest possible with such limited control options astounds me, frankly. You have two cursors at the bottom of the screen. The top cursor is your general horizontal location on the screen. You move this cursor left and right to attack enemies and turn down corridors, while simply holding forward on the joystick will navigate you forward. The second cursor acts more like a menu. By moving it left and right, you can select your weapon of choice, perform a U-turn, run from enemies, or even loot treasure. The player can only operate one cursor at a time and must press up or down to toggle between. This can become an issue during battle, as switching between them can be a bit of an issue from time to time, but it works for the most part. That's really all there is to the controls. Simple, effective, genius. Navigation is tough if you don't take the time to make a map as you progress, and since all the corridors look the exact same shade of green, it's definitely a necessity. I often just imagine that I was trampling through a freshly trimmed hedge maze as opposed to a crypt. The game does use colors to differentiate between intersections and monster layers, which are represented by blue and purple respectively. There are also rarely stairs that will transport you to the next floor, and there are 18 of these, so finding and mapping to these locations should be a primary objective. Your main objective, though, is to hunt down monster layers and gain points by defeating these monsters and other random enemies along the way. To do this, you must brandish one of three trusty weapons. The player has access to a short-range sword that has unlimited uses, a long-range wand, and a powerful magic ring that have a set number of uses depending upon the difficulty chosen. The constant thought of what weapon is needed for each battle keeps the game exciting and even, in a way, stressful, as you really do need to manage your resources wisely. There's always a bit of an adrenaline rush when you wait and see what enemies you've encountered and have to decide your strategy in moments. The player starts with 99 health points and will lose them as enemies get too close. Health can only be recovered by using the magic ring, so while it is powerful, it should be saved until really needed. One of my main complaints with the game is that you don't know how many wands and rings you've used, or even have left, so you have to kind of keep track of them, by paper, or just hope you don't run out. I suppose keeping a tally on your homemade map is an option, but there really should be a counter. The dramatic effect when various music tracks kick in during enemy encounters based upon enemy difficulty really add to the tension. I can honestly say that I've never been truly engrossed by a game of this era, nor by a first-person dungeon crawler. But the sound effects, engaging combat, and sense of urgency captured me like few games can to this day. It's actually pretty crazy. Besides the controls being awkward at times, there was one other element that removed me from the experience. The thudding sound that is made every time you take a step forward in the dungeons just becomes irritating after a while. It's unfortunate, as the rest of the audio for this game is superb. There you have it, YouTube. That's Crypts of Chaos for the Atari 2600. I'm going to have to give it an 80 out of 100. You know, the game has its issues. The controls are kind of wonky. The dungeon's hard to navigate. But just the sheer fact that they can pull a game off like that on the Atari 2600, and it's actually fun to play, which I was really surprised about. I mean, there's something to be said for that. It's really good, and I highly suggest that you guys go check it out. And as always, I'm Zyloc with Media Hindsight, signing out.